There is a moment most people never talk about. It happens quietly, somewhere between the excitement of a new job offer and the slow realization months later that nothing has actually changed. The number on the paycheck went up, the rent went up, the car payment went up. The dinners out became slightly more frequent, the phone plan slightly more premium, the gym membership slightly more justified. And somehow, at the end of the month, the account looks almost identical to what it looked like before the raise. Not empty, not overflowing, just the same quiet, unsettling flatness that was there before. This is not a story about being irresponsible. This is not a lecture about lattes or avocado toast. This is a story about a system so deeply embedded in the psychology of modern earning that most people participate in it without ever being aware it exists. Economists have a name for it. Behavioral researchers have studied it for decades. And yet the pattern keeps repeating across income levels, across generations, across countries. As if something in human psychology is wired to neutralize every financial gain almost automatically. The phenomenon is called lifestyle inflation, but that name undersells it. Inflation implies prices rising around you. What actually happens is more intimate than that. Your identity rises. Your sense of what is normal rises. Your baseline expectation of comfort, convenience, and status quietly recalibrates, and the gap between what you earn and what you spend remains almost perfectly preserved, regardless of how much the numbers grow. When someone earns very little, they develop a precise and often painful relationship with money. Every purchase is weighed. Every unnecessary expense becomes a source of anxiety. There is a kind of enforced financial discipline that comes not from wisdom but from necessity. And buried inside that constraint is something important, an awareness of cost, a consciousness of value. Then income rises and something subtle begins to shift. The mental accounting relaxes not all at once, not dramatically, but the friction that once existed around small purchases begins to dissolve. A slightly nicer apartment feels reasonable because you can technically afford it. A car with more features feels justified because the monthly payment is manageable. A streaming service, a premium subscription, a standing order at a restaurant you now consider part of your normal week. Each decision feels individually rational, and it is, individually each one makes sense, but collectively they form something else entirely. Researchers studying this pattern found that the psychological experience of earning more money tends to plateau far earlier than the actual income does. The emotional feeling of financial progress stops long before the raises stop coming, because each new income level is quickly absorbed into a new normal, and the new normal becomes the baseline. You are not comparing your life today to your life 2 years ago. You are comparing it to your life last month. And last month already included the apartment, the car, the subscriptions, the restaurants, the life built to match the salary you have now. Because the problem is never visible in any single month, any given month, the budget looks reasonable. But zoom out over years and the pattern reveals itself. Every raise has been absorbed. Every bonus has been consumed. Every promotion has led to a slightly larger life that now requires that income level simply to function. And the distance between financial pressure and financial freedom has not closed at all. It has merely shifted upward, carrying the same anxiety to a higher altitude. In the decades following the Second World War, a generation of workers entered a rapidly expanding economy. Wages rose, standards of living rose with them, but the psychological benchmarks rose faster than the wages did. Sociologists documented something they called the hedonic treadmill, the human tendency to return to a stable baseline of satisfaction regardless of positive or negative changes. You earn more, you feel better briefly, then better becomes normal, and normal feels like not enough. The treadmill never stops, it only gets faster. What makes this particularly difficult to escape is that it is not irrational. Every individual decision inside the pattern makes complete sense. Of course you move to a better neighborhood when you can afford it. Of course you replace the aging car. Of course you eat at restaurants that reflect your new professional identity. The problem is not the decisions. The problem is the absence of a structure that captures the gap before the gap disappears. Most people spend what arrives, not because they are reckless, because that is what the system is designed to encourage. Because no one installs a psychological firewall between the paycheck and the lifestyle that forms around it. Consider two people who both receive a 15% raise over 5 years. One person allows their spending to expand with their income, the most natural and socially normal response. The other keeps spending essentially fixed at the previous level. At the end of 10 years, the second person has not just saved money, they have fundamentally altered the structure of their financial future. Not because they were more disciplined in some moral sense, but because they chose to make the gap between income and lifestyle visible, concrete, and protected. Marketing systems are designed to match your spending appetite to your income level. Social environments evolve with your earnings. The people around you at a new income level have lifestyles that reflect that income. Social pressure, even when invisible, is one of the most consistent predictors of spending behavior ever identified in economic psychology research. You do not just spend money, you spend to belong, you spend to signal, you spend to maintain the version of yourself that your income level implies you should be. And so the trap closes. Not with a dramatic crash, not with a catastrophic mistake, just with the quiet, continuous expansion of a life that requires all of it, exactly as it arrives, with nothing left over to change the trajectory of what comes next. Years pass, decades in some cases, the salary keeps moving, the lifestyle keeps matching it. And somewhere in the middle of a Tuesday at a job that pays more than any job once seemed imaginable, a person sits with the same quiet, unsettling flatness, wondering why enough never quite arrived. The answer is not to earn less. The answer is to understand what earning more actually does to the mind, before the mind has already done it to the budget. Because the salary trap is not a failure of character, it is a feature of human psychology operating exactly as it was built to operate, inside a system that profits from precisely that operation. Recognizing it is not the end of the problem, but it is genuinely where the problem becomes possible to change. Every morning begins the same way, the commute, the routine, the motion of a life structured entirely around income, surrounded by others doing the same, moving toward the same exchange, time and attention for income that will be fully absorbed before it arrives. The floors rise, the titles change, the calendar fills. And in the small spaces between tasks, the question returns quietly, not loudly, not urgently, just present. When does it become enough? And what would enough even look like inside a system designed to continuously redefine it? The new normal doesn't announce itself. It simply becomes the water you live in, invisible, total, and completely taken for granted. The evenings fill with comfort, the comfort becomes the rhythm, and the rhythm asks nothing, which is why it changes nothing. The list is long, each item is reasonable, and together they constitute a life that consumes exactly what it generates. The machine runs smoothly, it always does. That is precisely what makes it so difficult to question. The display is always just slightly ahead of where you are, designed to make where you feel like almost enough, but not quite. The feed shows you what the people around you are building, and the baseline recalibrates again, quietly, automatically, without asking permission. Across the city, across the country, across every income level, the pattern repeats in perfect parallel, invisible to those inside it. But awareness interrupts the automatic, not dramatically, just enough to ask a different question. What if the gap were made visible before the lifestyle filled it? What if instead of letting the lifestyle expand to fill the rays, some of the rays were moved first, before the identity had time to claim it? The lifestyle never misses what it never received, but the container grows. And over time, the container changes everything. Not because of dramatic sacrifice, not because of perfect discipline, but because the gap was protected before the identity could absorb it. The life doesn't have to change entirely, the relationship to the life does. The city keeps moving, the system keeps running, and inside it, the question of what to do with awareness becomes the most important financial question of all. The choice is not made once. It is made in the small moments before the lifestyle expands, before the identity claims the rays, before the new normal sets. The system can be used consciously, just as it has always been used unconsciously. The mechanism is identical, only the intention changes. Because what the trap costs most is not the money. It is the time spent earning the money that goes entirely into maintaining a life that feels just short of enough. Every purchase is made with time, not money. The money is just the intermediate step between the hours of your life and the things those hours become. When the accounting is done in hours instead of dollars, the lifestyle reveals a different kind of cost, one that compounds differently and cannot be recaptured. Time is the currency that was spent to earn the currency that was spent on the life, and only one of them can accumulate. The moments that feel most like freedom are the ones that cost the least and require the fewest hours to justify. Behavioral economists call it status quo bias, the tendency to remain in existing patterns even when the mathematics of changing clearly favor it. The discomfort of changing the pattern is real but finite. The cost of not changing it compounds indefinitely. Historically, as incomes rose and lifestyles expanded, savings rates moved in the opposite direction, not because people became less responsible, but because the system became more sophisticated at absorbing the difference. The individual pattern is the aggregate pattern. What happens to one person's paycheck is what happens to the economy's consumption curve, at scale, repeated across millions. You are not the exception inside a rational system, you are the system, expressing itself through the most natural human responses available. The identity that spending maintains is the most expensive subscription of all, and the most rarely examined. The gap between what is consumed and what could be protected is rarely dramatic, but its presence or absence determines everything about what the future looks like. The things that carry the most actual satisfaction tend to be the least expensive, and the most consistently undervalued inside the logic of lifestyle inflation. 10 years of protected gaps look nothing like 10 years of absorbed raises. The math is not complicated, the psychology of getting there is. The salary trap is not a personal failure, it is a human pattern, and human patterns once named can be navigated differently. Understanding the mechanism is the prerequisite to changing it, not the solution but the necessary beginning. The outcome is not determined by income level. It is determined by the relationship between income and the speed at which identity claims it. The life doesn't have to become dramatic to become different. The relationship to it changes first, and then slowly everything else follows. What accumulates quietly tends to be the only thing that eventually offers a genuine choice about how the future is structured. Financial pressure has a texture that lives in the body. A low-level hum most people have carried so long they no longer recognize it as pressure. When the gap is protected and the lifestyle no longer requires everything, the hum quiets, not all at once, but measurably over time. The life that was always possible doesn't always require more. Sometimes it requires less being consumed by the life that income implies you should be living. Inside the system, the current is strong and moves in one direction. Awareness doesn't stop the current, but it makes it possible to navigate rather than simply be carried. The loop is not a trap that can be broken by willpower alone. It requires a structural intervention, a deliberate mechanism placed between income and identity before the identity moves in. The intervention doesn't have to be large, it has to be early before the lifestyle adjusts, before the new normal sets, before the identity recalibrates to claim what arrived. Most people will recognize this pattern somewhere in their own lives, not because they were careless, but because the system is very, very good at what it does. The city doesn't change based on any individual's relationship with their income, but the individual's life does quietly, incrementally, in the direction of whichever pattern is running. The decision is not made in a dramatic moment. It is made in the ordinary ones, in the gap between what arrives and what the lifestyle immediately claims. Name it, measure it, move it first. These 3 steps are the entire structural intervention, simple enough to be real, specific enough to be effective. The city is the same, the system is the same, the awareness is not. The treadmill doesn't disappear, but something beside it begins to grow slowly, quietly, in the direction that the treadmill alone never leads. The salary trap is not a life sentence. It is a default, and defaults can be changed one deliberate gap at a time. Recognizing it is not the end of the problem, but it is genuinely where the problem becomes possible to change.